Perimenopause can make it feel like what used to work doesn't work anymore. And I'm sure your clients have said the same thing to you, right, Coach?
It's probably one of the things you hear the most
Yeah.
when you're working with
Yeah.
that particular age group.
This is probably at least 90% of who I work with. Probably the same thing with you, Coach. Around the same kind of numbers there, yeah. And a common pattern that we see when people first approach us for help with this is they're eating the same meals, doing the same kinds of workouts. They're not changing anything, but they're getting worse results. In fact, not only are they not losing weight, but they're gaining weight. And they're not lying either, right? This is like actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think what they may at least be feeling, whether they express it to us or not, is they feel that maybe their metabolism has slowed down or is broken. Hormones are all out of whack and are causing this weight gain. And one client, this is genuinely true. She said to me that her doctor said to her, "Yeah, this is just what happens when you hit 40." And their doctor may be coming from a place of having observed this happening over and over again. I don't like and I disagree with how that doctor is framing it as, you just got to accept it at this point. Because you don't.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a circumstance of generalizing a symptom predicated on whatever they've seen in their practice, which could very well be true based on who they've worked with and the things that they've seen. And yeah, it would make sense to make that statement if that's
Yeah.
the approach and what you've seen happen with your clients or your patients rather. And yeah, I don't necessarily think that that's accurate either. I'm not by any means, like, again, as we always say, we have zero medical qualifications between us. However, there are many people that we have worked with, both of us, that have seen results even after 40.
Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, we wouldn't have jobs right now if we weren't able to help these women going through perimenopause, right? And the truth is that your metabolism does not drop in perimenopause. I'm going to say that again. Your metabolism does not drop in perimenopause. The rules of fat loss have not changed. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that to deny the experience that you're having. I'm saying that because I want to let you know that you actually have a lot more control than you realize. That statement, or those statements, I'm making them to help you feel like you actually have power to do something and to change this. Because what has actually changed, and I made a list here of things that have actually changed around this kind of age. Sleep quality is probably worse, and that may well be related to perimenopause and the hormonal shifts. Your recovery has slowed down just as part of having like a body that isn't 20 years old anymore. Our ability to recover from workouts just slows down as we age. That's not the same as our metabolism slowing down. It just takes, I think of it in this way. I think of it as we need an extra night of sleep before we fully recover from a workout. So whereas in our 20s, it may have taken 1 or 2 sleeps, now it takes 2 or 3 sleeps to recover from a workout. Your stress has probably increased because at this age, maybe you have some kids. Maybe you are climbing the ladder at work. And all of that responsibility means more stress. Your daily movement may have decreased because this has happened to me and I've had to be very intentional about it. I moved from downtown Toronto to the suburbs of Halifax. If you do that, there's going to be a drop in your daily activity. And I guess your structure overall has either weakened or has just completely fallen apart. And the old approach, the things that used to work, don't work now because you're almost a different person now. You're at least a different version of who you were, the way that you live life, your responsibilities, everything's different now. And that version of you is gone. So what needs to happen now? Bearing in mind we're a bit older, got kids, more responsibilities, takes longer to recover from workouts. It's time for a different approach. Not the same approach trying to be forced into this current way of living. Not more discipline. You need a different approach that is more appropriate for who you are and where you are now.
Mm.
It's not an inherently better approach. It's just a better approach for you. That's what you need now.
To take the same approach and expect different results, right? I think that's the definition of
Yeah.
insanity. And
Yeah.
when you look at all the things that you mentioned, like you're still, yeah, you're the same person, quote unquote, like you are who you are from an identity perspective, but that identity evolves and changes over time. And the environmental stressors and the environmental components are going to switch and change, right? Like you mentioned for yourself, for example, you went from downtown Toronto to the suburbs of Halifax. Those are very different environmental stressors.
Yeah.
So how your body manages that to keep you safe, to keep you stable, to survive is going to be quite different compared to you in your 20s when, again, responsibilities were different. And it's also not to be upset or be feel a particular way about the way things are now. It's not implying that life is bad now because of this. It's you
Mm.
would want to have that evolution. This is part of growth and going through stages of life, right? I'm confident anyone who's listening to this that's a mom, the best thing that's happened to you is your kids. I feel like that's often the statement we hear too.
Mm.
So if you would have to say, okay, I'll give up my kids for the sake of having the similar body that I had in my 20s, I don't know. Then maybe, and if that's the way you feel about it, again, same, like it's okay to feel that way too. However, I think most would agree that their kids are something that they're happy that they have in their life, and they're happy to have had the sacrifices made to be able to have
Yeah.
the life they have now.
Mm. Yeah. Absolutely, coach. Yeah. Let's just go back a second to metabolism, because I think that's
Mm,
going to be a common objection. And us just saying your metabolism doesn't slow down, that isn't really good enough. Don't take
mm,
our word for it. There's a study. I'm going to link to it in the show notes. It's called Daily Energy Expenditure Through the Human Life Course. This came out in the last, I think, 3 or 4 years.
mm,
And it showed that your metabolism pretty much stays the same from age 20 until age 60. Now, one objection to this kind of study that I hear is, oh, it's just not done on enough people. Yeah, well, this was done on over 6,000 people. So we have a decent number of participants here. Another objection that I hear is, oh, all of these studies, they're all done on men. Women aren't included in these studies. Well, 64% of the people who participated were female. Okay. We also have a very wide age range from like literally a few days old up to 95 years old. So we've got participants from like throughout the entire human lifespan. And it wasn't a country specific study. There were people from 29 countries involved. And again, click that link in the show notes and go read it for yourself if you want. But it shows very clearly that metabolism doesn't change between age 20 and age 60. And even at age 60, the decline is then very slow, at about 1% per year. So this is not about turning 40. Okay. This is about other things that have actually changed. We've already kind of gone through them. We talked about how you've got more responsibilities at work, at home, stress is higher, and you therefore have less time. You have less time to train, to move, to think about meal prep. And that's fair. It's totally fair. You also move from the city to the suburbs. There's less walking built into your day-to-day life. Like for a lot of people, they can go from sitting in the morning while they're having coffee and breakfast to then sitting in the car or on the train or the bus on the way to work, to then sitting at their desk all day, to then sitting on the commute back home, to then sitting all evening.
One of my
There's,
mentors used to say
yeah,
that life takes place in a series of chairs.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And because when you lived in the city, you just weren't used to having to think about walking, well, now that pattern is carried over. You still don't think about walking. And as a result, you've gone from 10 to 12,000 steps per day to 2 or 3,000 steps per day. And so if you're moving less, your the amount of calories that you burn each day is just going to drop. But that isn't that isn't a slower metabolism. That's you not moving more. This is a lifestyle choice, because it is a choice for you to not choose to look at your steps and to think about them. Ultimately, it's a choice. Coach, what happens to muscle if you are not strength training? What happens from age around 30 if you're
I'm
not
glad you
strength
brought this
training?
up.
Yeah,
Yeah, this was my thought when you were just speaking now. Muscle is very metabolically costly, right? So it requires a lot of energy to maintain your muscle, and your body is trying to do its best to keep everything efficient. And if something is very metabolically costly, meaning that it requires a lot of resources for it to be maintained, then if you're moving less, you don't necessarily need that muscle. So you start to lose it. This is one of the principles of strength training. If you don't use it, you lose it. Everybody's heard of this, or I would like to think most people have heard of this. So you start to lose that muscle, you start to lose your strength because there's no need for it. Your body recognizes that you're not using it as in like your day-to-day activity. There's no function for it. So instead of burning resources, you start to lose that muscle, and that tends to be what people are interpreting as a drop in their metabolism.
yeah. And again, it's like you're choosing not to strength train.
Hmm.
If you were to strength train, this would not happen. So it's 3 to 8% that you're losing per decade of your muscle mass if you're not strength training. That is going to accelerate around menopause. It's also going to accelerate after like age 60 or so.
Hmm. Yeah, you can
I
think of it
guess you could.
as I was going to mention. You can think of it
Mm,
as for people who have, if you've ever changed your vehicle and you go from, you're single, you're young, you've got a sedan or a sport car, a coupe, for example, something that's like a performance engine. Awesome. And now you go to an SUV because you've got kids, you need more space. It's the same size engine, but you notice that the power that the vehicle has isn't quite the same because it's more mass to move. The engine isn't the same size relative to the amount of car that it has to move. So the engine, which is your muscle, starts to decrease, and you don't have the same capacity that you once used to.
yeah, just good way of putting it, coach. Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, if you have less muscle, you burn fewer calories at rest. And I guess somebody could argue, oh, but this is just part of aging. You lose muscle, right? I mean, yeah, but it's because we have very sedentary lives if we're not intentional about it. That's why we lose the muscle. In our in our hunter gatherer days, we would have been doing more more things requiring physical exertion, which would
Mm.
mean we just wouldn't lose muscle at that same rate because we'd actually be using our muscles. But if all you're doing is commuting to work and then sitting at work and then driving home and you're not really exerting any force, you don't need the muscle. So yeah, you just lose that muscle. And a lot of people around perimenopause have told me that I weigh the same as I did 10 years ago, but my clothes don't fit me anymore. Well, that's because you've experienced body recomposition, but in the opposite direction that that people want to see. Most people want, when they say body recomposition, they mean they want more muscle and less fat. But yours has happened in the opposite direction. You've
Mm.
gained fat and lost muscle. So you may well weigh the same or close to the same as you did 10 years ago. But your body composition has not moved in the direction that you want it to move in.
Hmm.
You made a note there, coach. What were you writing down?
Yeah, it just brought up this. It was a quote that I remember reading somewhere that said, "You don't stop playing because you get old. You get old because you stop playing."
Yeah,
Where because you haven't done the thing, your ability to do the thing then decreases. Right? Again, going back to like if you don't use it,
yeah,
you lose it. Right?
yep, exactly. Then we have to think about food.
Hmm.
For a lot of people, portion sizes tend to slowly increase over time, especially when you're making food for not just you anymore. You're making food for like lots of people. So there's just lots of food there. And we know that if there is more food available, you are just going to put more of it on your plate. It's just what happens. There's also like more snacking because you've got the kids' snacks in the house. Maybe you're picking at their dinner that they didn't finish as well. And maybe you've got into a pattern of socializing on the weekend that involves food and drinks. So when you're in that situation, you're not really going to be paying attention to how many calories you're consuming. And so this could easily lead to an unnoticeable calorie surplus day to day and week to week. You're probably like maybe in a surplus of, let's say, 100 to 300 calories per day, which you could easily do without feeling even slightly like gross or bloated. And you're going to gain maybe a half pound of body fat in a month, which isn't a lot. But if you do that every month for 10 years, now you're 60 pounds heavier. That's why so many people that I speak to, and I'm sure it's the same with you, coach, they say like, oh, it was almost unnoticeable. It's like it's been a very, very slow creep over the years. There wasn't like a period where I rapidly gained a lot of weight. It almost just took me by surprise. I felt like one day I woke up and I was 30 pounds heavier. Have you also spoken to people like that, coach?
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's two times of year in at least where we live where people notice this the most. And it's usually when the seasons change because then your clothes change. Right. So if you're in a
Yeah.
circumstance in which you have more resources available, you're buying new clothes every year or you're buying new pieces that you like, things tend to fit more comfortable when you go and buy them at the store. You buy what feels and fits right, but you don't notice that it might be a size bigger, or you think maybe it's just the fit or the brand that makes the clothes bigger or smaller, right? So as you start to go across this decade that you're referring to, all of a sudden now you have much bigger clothes, right? So it's hard to use things like clothes as a metric in this circumstance.
Yeah.
But almost every person I would say that I've spoken to all says like, yeah, my jeans don't fit from 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago. Right. So we all have those pieces of clothing that are, what I reference as like our different weight class clothes.
Absolutely, coach. Yeah. Yep. Then there's sleep to think about too.
Hmm.
Kids are going to lead to poor sleep. Stress from work is going to lead to poor sleep. Poor sleep means it's going to be harder to recover from training. It just takes longer to recover from training anyway. And so you could easily be more hungry, not train as well because you're always in this state of recovery, always tired. And when those things happen, hunger also tends to increase, contributing to that slight overeating that we touched on before.
Hmm.
Also, if you're just always tired and feel like, oh, like after a couple of weeks of exercise, I feel like I'm just like burnt out completely, you're going to keep stopping. You're going to do well for a couple of weeks, then you're going to stop training for a few weeks and get back on track for a couple of weeks, then fall back off track for a couple of weeks. So you're being very inconsistent. And the final thing I want to touch on is structure. Because when you're single or it's just you and your partner, structure is easy. Planning's easy because you're basically responsible for yourself. You don't have to plan as much, really, right? When you're single or it's just you and your partner, you can kind of get away with being reactive in the moment and making choices as the day goes on, because it's just not going to lead to as much decision fatigue when we also add on kids, when we also add on you're like 2 or 3 levels higher in your organization, in your company now. And so you could get away with not really having a structure Maybe your structure was, oh, I have like the same breakfast every day and I do my workouts on these days and I kind of figure out meals as we go along. Because you just don't realize at the time, I know that I didn't, how much easier life is when you don't have kids and when you're not 2 or 3 levels higher in your company. Because you have fewer responsibilities. It's as simple as that. It doesn't mean like you're a worse person, right? Because it's so much easier. It just means that now there's extra responsibilities. And if you try to wing it and figure everything out as you go through the day, decision fatigue is going to be way higher, and you're not going to be able to be as consistent.
Yeah, there's definitely a structure.
Yeah.
It's about taking a moment to pull back and take a higher level overview of what that structure actually looks like, though, because there's that, like we've mentioned this before, there is consistency in your inconsistency. There is structure in your lack of structure. But when you're so close to the structure itself, like you're just in it, it's hard to
Yeah.
see what that structure really looks like. But there is a framework there. It's just not one that's serving you relative to what your goals are.
And hopefully now that we've gone through all of these various things that have been happening, now it's hopefully easier for you to see why it isn't a slow metabolism. It can still feel like it, though. I do get that, because it can also feel hormonal. And to a certain extent, weight gain in perimenopause is hormonal, specifically where you store the fats, because those hormonal changes that happen around menopause, perimenopause, they do change where the fat is stored. They do not inherently cause fat gain. I'm going to say that one more time. They do not inherently cause fat gain. They do, though, change where you store the fat when you're in a calorie surplus, which again is why you've gained weight around perimenopause. You're in a calorie surplus. And by the way, just to be clear again, perimenopause is going to make this whole thing way more difficult. And you and I, Coach, are extremely fortunate in that this is one of the things that as men we're not going to have to deal with. Extremely fortunate. Because it's really fucking hard to go through perimenopause and to get your weight under control. That's why I've got so much respect for the people that we work with and get results. Like, they put the work in, we help them put together a plan, but it's not us doing the work for them. They have to go away and then execute on that plan. Imagine doing that when your hormones are all out of whack and you can barely fucking sleep and everything, right?
Yeah, I think what you just mentioned really hits the nail on the head, though. It's a circumstance of coming up with a plan, like we mentioned earlier, that's relative to your situation.
Yeah.
But then the other 99% of the equation is implementing that plan. And if it's a plan that's not relative to what's contextual to your current circumstance, good luck. Like, it's not going to it's going to be, there's going to be so much friction to try and implement that.
Yeah, absolutely, Coach.
Yeah.
Okay, so I kind of went off on a tangent about what happens about fat storage and fat gain during perimenopause with the hormonal changes. Yeah. So because of those changes, fat that is gained when you're in a calorie surplus tends to be stored around the abdominal area, around the waist, which is why so many women around that kind of time, they experience like a bigger belly. I think it's called, is it menobelly? I really hate that word. I think that's what I've seen it referred to as, menobelly, where you gain that belly fat around menopause. It happens because you are in a calorie surplus. And those hormonal changes have happened. Which is why it can feel like, if you haven't thought through all of the changes that have happened to you over the last few years, like how you live your life, your circumstances, kids, job responsibilities, if you haven't thought that through, it can be very easy to feel that, oh, this is like menopause. Menopause is inherently causing fat gain around my abdomen and around my abs, and I've got all this fat in the belly area now. I mean, like, no, it isn't a slow metabolism. It really is not. And the reason that your old approach doesn't work, especially if it was, let's say, an approach or a plan that you found online, or that you were given as part of like a group training experience. It's because that system worked when you were sleeping better, when you could recover faster, when you had less stress, when you had more time, when you didn't have any kids. Now you need a set of systems and structure that assume you have less time and more responsibility and kids and more constraints in general. So the mismatch is trying to do the things that used to work when you had a different life now that you have a different life. That's the mismatch. I guess it's a mismatch between strategy and reality.
It's like trying to do the work that you do without using a computer just because you didn't have a computer before and you knew how to do that. Like you're not applying the current circumstance or the certain context to the situation that
Yeah.
you're currently in. It just doesn't. I hate using this phrase because I feel like it's so overused, but you're trying to jam a square peg into a round hole, and it just does not fit, right? So
Yeah.
you're trying to apply, again, like you mentioned, either like that's a group scenario that you're working in, or I've worked in before, or this had always worked and now it's not, and then to just double down and continue to do more, like you had mentioned,
Yeah.
being more disciplined, etc. Like the discipline's not the challenge or the issue, it's the approach.
Absolutely. And the approach, the solution to this, it's always individual because everybody has a different life to somebody else. Like no two of our clients will ever be given the exact same approach because it wouldn't make sense. Yeah, there are things in common. Like we've got to think about kids, we've got to think about job, we've got to think about sleep, we've got to think about weekends. So there are lots of things for us to think about. So there are certain areas that we do have to address that our clients pretty much all have in common. But the specific approach to how we do that in each area is going to depend very much on the person.
Mm.
It's why I literally have like a 1 to 2 hour call with people before we start working together so I can actually ask questions and find out more about them and then come up with a plan after literally a couple of hours of conversation.
Yeah.
We don't sell plans. I think we said it before on the podcast. We don't sell plans. We figure out an approach, a system that works for you,
Yeah. I
right?
I almost, there have been times when I've onboarded people where I thought, man, this is a lot of questions to go through, but that's what you want. The
Yeah.
more honest people are with their situation in the context of their life,
Yeah.
the easier it is for us as coaches who have worked with people in similar circumstances in the past to help them see around those corners before they hit a roadblock or before they hit a speed bump, to be able to help them anticipate that and come up with a plan to work around that as well.
Yeah. Exactly, coach. So I think big picture view is you need structure. You need systems. You need this in place to make this, to reduce the cognitive demand as much as possible. Because this should not be a thing that you have to think about and make decisions about through the day. This should just be a thing that you do throughout the day without really thinking about it. So we're talking about weight loss. I'm sure if you are listening to this, you know that we are both advocates for calorie tracking when we're trying to lose weight. Calorie tracking can be a huge fucking pain if you're not doing it right. Because there is zero chance for me, coach, of getting my phone out more than once a day, maybe twice at a push to track what I'm going to be eating. But the problem is we eat 3 meals, sometimes a snack as well. So what I do with the majority of my clients who track is we pre-track, especially if they have a demanding job and they have kids and they have other responsibilities. We spend a couple of minutes the night before or the morning of pre-tracking the calories. Okay. So they go into each day knowing exactly what their meals are going to look like. It takes 3-ish minutes to do that. And that way they go through the day without having to plan breakfast or plan lunch or decide what dinner's going to be. And they can keep that decision making for other stuff, for work, for kids. We also make this as simple as possible by giving them calorie ranges to aim for. instead of a specific calorie number, because it's just much easier. It takes less effort to hit a range than a specific number.
Mm.
We also only worry about tracking protein in terms of the three macros of protein, fat, and carbs. We just track calories and protein, and again, they have a very big protein range to hit. So we make it as easy as possible to hit calories, to hit protein, and to not have to spend too much time thinking about this day to day. We also put as much as we realistically can on autopilot and on repeat. So, for example, I'm in a weight loss phase right now. My breakfast and my lunch is pretty much the same most days. Like every 2 to 4 weeks, I'll introduce a second breakfast or a second lunch. But it's the same pretty much all the time.
Mm.
So I don't have to worry about making the choice. What am I going to have for breakfast tomorrow? What am I going to have for lunch? The variety comes at dinner time. So that's how we give people a big picture, simple structure around food, and the specifics, as we've said, would very much depend on the person that we work with. But for, if you're listening to this and you want to build a structure, like there's your template right there: calorie ranges, protein ranges, pre-tracking. What are your thoughts, Coach?
I agree with you with what you're saying. Obviously, I think a lot of the I I very much so feel that there is not enough emphasis on just how advanced calorie tracking really is as an approach to take to something like this, because it is
Sure.
an advanced approach at the end of the day. And a lot of the time, we've also helped members work their way up into this more
Yep.
advanced approach too.
Mm.
Because, okay, let's break it down. You want to track calories? Cool. So you're going to need either some sort of calorie tracker, MyFitnessPal, whatever tool or app you want to use. Cool. Let's take a step before that. You're going to need scale, measuring cups, spoons, all those things before that. Okay, do you have that? Yes, no. Great. Now, what is it that you're going to measure? Your food. Cool. Do you prepare your food? Yes, no. Okay. But if you're preparing your food, do you do groceries? Yes, no. Do you go to a particular grocery store on a specific day? Right. So it's these series of other steps that have to come first. And when you
Yeah.
start at the top of the ladder, this is also what's creating so much more demand and mental load, is that
Mm.
you've not prepared yourself to be able to succeed with something that's as advanced as calorie tracking. I'm not saying
Yeah.
it's advanced for the sake of saying it's complex or complicated. It's advanced because there's a series of smaller steps that have to happen prior to being able to actually do that accurately and properly for yourself.
It assumes that you know how to cook. It assumes that you kind of know what protein, fats, and carbs are and what are sources of foods from that. So it does assume quite a lot of either knowledge or skill.
Mm.
And I am with you, Coach. With a lot of my clients, like when we've kind of started stuff out, sometimes we don't calorie track until like week 4, week 6, and we just focus on, okay, breakfast and lunch. Let's just start there because you've got that snacking in the evening that's always happening. Can
Mm.
we make sure that there is a source of protein at breakfast and lunch that is about the size of 1 to 2 worths of your palm? And is there also a source of produce, fruit or vegetables, that's kind of like 1 to 2, like take your fist, like 1 to 2 fists worth of that in each meal? And we maybe just start there. And we build the skill over time, and then we introduce calorie tracking. Yeah. But I think a lot of people listen to this. I think they have those skills, most likely. They can
Mm.
cook. They know what protein is. They know what carbs are. Mostly from having tried a lot of stuff in the past. If you tried keto, you know where to find protein, right? For example, which is actually one of the few things that I will say in favor of any kind of like diet with a name. Pretty much all of them focus on protein,
Mm.
with some exceptions, of course. Whether it's keto or paleo or like whole foods, there's a big focus on protein with lots of them. So if somebody tells you that they've tried keto in the past, I pretty much straight away think, well, you know what? They're going to be able to hit those protein ranges, no problem, at least. We may have to
Mm.
show them that carbs are not the enemy, but at least they can probably hit protein.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And by the way, protein is really important. for anybody who has maybe not really paid attention much to protein before but knows about protein, 2 eggs is not a high protein breakfast. It's 12 grams of protein. And we want people to hit somewhere between zero point 0.7 and 1 gram of protein per pound of either their lean body mass or of their target weight. So somebody who has a target weight of 150 pounds should be consuming between 105 and 150 grams of protein per day to make sure that you don't get hungry in a calorie deficit and to make sure that you don't lose muscle in a calorie deficit.
Mm-hmm.
So protein is going to be very, very important. In fact, when you are pre-tracking or maybe spending some time planning your meals, decide what protein you're going to have first and then build the rest of the meal around it.
Yeah. I've often encouraged people to, when they're doing any sort of meal planning for the week for themselves, which also, by the way, we don't do meal plans because
Yeah.
again, it's individual, right? Whatever you eat is going to be different from what I eat, what your family wants versus what, my household
Yep.
wants. It's going to be very different. So encouraging someone, okay, if protein's the focus, pick your animal. What do you eat on Monday? If you're animal-based protein, okay? Pick your animal. What's Monday? Is that chicken? What's Tuesday? Is that pork? What's Wednesday? Is it beef? Picking something just kind of starts to build the structure over time so you know what to grocery shop for and how to prepare it as well.
Yeah. Also, if your sleep is off because of the perimenopause hormone changes, protein is going to be so important for helping you manage the hunger caused by that and the cravings caused by that too.
Mm.
So you got to get that protein. Really important. I think something else to think about too is your daily movement and simply becoming more intentional about how you are moving and when you're moving. If you are in that situation that we described before of going from chair to chair to chair in just various different locations, you need to start to be more intentional about how you move. Now, ideally, you'd be able to integrate it into your day at some point so that you don't have to think about it. To take me as an example, I have a dog who needs 2 walks per day. Great, I can get most likely, 3,000 to 6,000 steps per day, depending on him, depending on the weather, with just walking the dog. I also have a walking pad that I use whenever I'm doing any kind of admin, whenever I have a client call. The walking pad goes under the desk and I walk at the same time. So even though I live in the suburbs, I have integrated steps into my daily life in such a way that all I really need to decide to do is hit start on the walking pad and make it start moving. That's basically it.
Mm.
If you're not at that point yet, or maybe you don't have a walking pad, maybe you think, okay, cool. I'm going to first of all see where I am. How many steps am I getting? Let's say it's 3,000. Maybe step 1 is to get to 3,500 or 4,000. And it takes about 10 minutes to get 1,000 steps. So you can just break it down. Okay, if I want to go from 3 to 4, I can do a 5-minute walk before work and then a 5-minute walk after work. Done. There's 4,000. And when that feels easy, maybe I want to try and get from 4 to 5, and then from 5 to 6, and then from 6 to 7. And for me, 7,000 is the absolute minimum baseline. Walking will actually also, getting your 7 to 10,000 steps, which is where I want most of our clients to be, that will burn approximately 3 times as many calories as any workout that you do. So it's going to be responsible for burning a lot of calories day to day. Which is one reason why, if nothing else has changed for you, aside from moving from the city to moving to the suburbs, and your step count has dropped way down, yeah, that's why you're either gaining weight or you're not losing weight anymore. You're just not burning enough calories day to day.
One of my clients, I'd mentioned to him about how, I had started implementing a run in the morning. So I want to work on my cardiovascular fitness. And I'd said to him, like, yeah, like I'm getting much more steps. And he's like, are you? I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, like pull up your steps. I'm like, okay, cool. So I track my steps. I look at my steps and I looked at what they were like prior to starting this morning run that I had done to the last week and a half that I'd been doing it. And the thought was I was doing more steps because I had introduced this run. Yet the baseline was still the same because our body will auto-regulate in terms of our movement relative to our energy availability. So it's one of those things as well where, okay, just because you're implementing the idea of, say, an extra thing doesn't necessarily mean that the data is going to support that. So I think what you're mentioning here about steps, yeah, it's important using a walking pad, getting more steps. So I think also making sure that you're using something that is tracking it that's going to be accurate as well. So you can look at the data after, you know, in, after implementing an intervention or a particular approach and making sure
Mm.
that you're actually doing that. Because if you're using something like a walking pad, you're being very intentional, but you're not necessarily tracking it, you may just be moving the same amount. So you're not,
Yeah.
it's net zero in terms of the change, right? So
Yeah.
making sure that, okay, just because I have these scheduled walking pad breaks, am I subconsciously then just moving less throughout the day to accommodate for
Yeah.
that? Or am I actually increasing my baseline steps?
Yeah. Whilst I coach. Yeah. The other good thing about walking, instead of, for example, focusing on doing lots of cardio, it's way easier on the body. It's not going to require anywhere near as much recovery. Like for me, coach, like I don't need to recover from a day of getting steps. In fact, on my rest days, when I'm not doing a workout, I will still easily get bare minimum 7,000 steps. And it does not feel like an active day. That feels like an easy day.
Hmm.
Yeah. The other thing to focus on when you are thinking about your exercise is to move away, not completely, but to maybe stop having HIIT workouts be your main kind of workout, to stop having classes be your main kind of workout, and to instead strength train. Rather not instead strength train, add in strength training, cut down on the other things. Not cut out, cut down. You can still do HIIT, you can still do classes, just make sure that you are also strength training. And unless you have a workout buddy to go with you to the gym, strength training is typically a solo sport where you're in the gym, you're lifting weights. You need to be following a program. If you're not following a program, you are doing strength workouts. You are not strength training, which is where we have progressive overload. We're doing extra rep or use a slightly heavier weight each week. We have done an episode about strength training before. I'm going to link that in the show notes as well. So go and listen to that if you want to have more information about strength training. But it is required to maintain your muscle and also to rebuild the muscle that you've lost from not strength training over the years, and to keep your metabolism, well, not even your metabolism, but to, I guess technically it is metabolism, how many calories that you burn at rest, to keep that number nice and high because you have muscle.
I think the majority, I won't even say I think, I'll go as far as saying I know most of the people who go to these HIIT classes, as much as you're going there for your workout, which is great, you're not comparing all these things. You're totally
Mm-hmm.
comparing and competing with people in the class, even if they don't know it.
Fuck yeah,
Right?
you are. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why you're there,
I do.
right?
Whenever I go to a class, I never go to classes, but every now and then when I do, I'm always looking around. I'm like, I'm going to try and beat that guy. I'll beat that person.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
your treadmill's at 8. I'm going to 8.1. You know, Price is Right
I'm not,
rules. One
and here's
dollar
the thing,
over.
I'm not even competitive. I don't even give a fuck, but I still do it.
Yeah, same. Well, that's a lie. I'm very competitive. Well, I can be. So yeah, like if you want to perform better in your HIIT training, strength train, because the baseline of how strength, the phrase is endurance swims in a sea of strength. The stronger you are, the
Mm,
longer you'll be able to maintain the output.
yeah,
So you can think of that strength as your base of your physical capabilities. The stronger you are, the better you'll be able to, again, maintain that output that you're performing
yeah,
over a longer period of time in that class.
yeah. The other thing to think about when it comes to HIIT workouts, classes in general, we touched earlier on about how it takes longer to recover now.
Mm.
Yeah, HIIT workouts are just going to put you in this chronic state of recovery if you're doing too many of them. For most people around perimenopause, one or two is almost certainly fine. When it starts to be more than two per week, yeah, you're going to feel tired. You're going to feel low energy. You're also going to feel hungrier because your body's going to be crying out for nutrients and calories to recover from those workouts.
Yeah, I would also, my thought with this as well too is that I wouldn't even go as far to say that, and I know you're not implying this, but I wouldn't go as far
Mm-hmm.
to say it's the workouts. I think it's just this overall picture of you're doing more work in those sessions relative to what you would do in a strength training session. Therefore, the
Yes.
intensity is higher and the
Mm-hmm.
recovery time is going to take longer. And
Yes.
most people who go to 2, 3 days a week of training at these HIIT classes, let's pan out a typical schedule. It's Sunday's the start of the week. You're not training. Probably Monday, not on
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday, probably Wednesday, not on Thursday, probably Friday, Saturday, maybe it's a rest day, or you're running around doing errands. So if you need that extra day, like you're mentioning in between your workouts, then when you look at the dosage in terms of the overall week of the activity you're having, there's really never a point in time in which you are actually fully recovered. And I'm not trying to imply that you have to be fully recovered to be able to work out. You can work out at less recovery, give
Yeah.
100% of what you have to offer for the day.
Yeah.
However, if you want to see the lean muscle get built, if you want to see the scale start to go down and trend downwards, or your measurements rather, seeing this fat loss, it's going to require a balance between output and input being relative to your recovery.
Yeah. Well said, coach. And speaking of recovery, you really need to take your sleep seriously at this time. You really do. Like, if you are going to bed, what's the latest phrase to excuse a poor choice? What's it called? Reverse bedtime procrastination. Way of
Yes.
rationalizing, I choose to go to bed late. Yeah, I think that's what I think. Is that the phrase, coach, or am I misremembering it?
Are you referring to the phrase that absolves yourself of responsibility to make
Yeah, exactly.
a proper decision?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, precisely. So we stay up late watching Netflix or whatever. In fact, I may be misquoting, but I'm pretty sure that I heard or I read a quote from somebody at one of these streaming services that said, our main competitor is sleep.
I think that was Netflix. I
Yeah,
think it might have been Netflix. Yeah.
yeah. We may be wrong there. It may be, but yeah. One of those
Allegedly.
services allegedly, yeah. Yeah. Allegedly somebody from Netflix said that their main competitor is sleep. I would have to, let me quickly Google that. Okay. So looking through this, the CEO Reed Hastings of Netflix was quoted. This is in 2017 as well. Said that, and this may be a joke. I don't know. I have not actually seen the video, but this has been quoted in The Guardian, so I guess we can trust it. Netflix's biggest competitor is sleep. May have been a
Mm-hmm.
joke, but like a lot of jokes, it also has foundations in truth, right?
Every joke's got a kernel of truth.
Yeah. And so if you're going to bed late, using your phone in bed, of course you're going to feel hungry every day. Of course you're going to feel like you have no energy. Of course. But you need to make the choice. You need to make the hard choice to go to bed at a more reasonable time. I'm not saying that you've got to go to bed at 9 p.m. and wake up at 5 a.m., okay? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying get 7 hours at least, huh? And don't use the phone
Yeah.
in bed. That's all I'm asking.
There's a lot of conversation around like bedtimes, and I think that that's obviously important because you're going to get the adequate volume of sleep that you need. I think a
Yeah.
good place to start for most people, personally, from my coaching philosophy, is don't necessarily uh, don't necessarily get so hung up on the bedtime. Make the wake up time consistent.
Yes.
Because when you make the wake up time consistent, then the following night's bedtime will start to hash itself out within a half hour, 45 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to be tired. We've all had days where we've woken up ready for bed. Let's be real.
Yeah.
And when that's the case, like, yeah, okay, okay, I can't wait to get to bed. Awesome. I'm excited for you to go there. When you have that ability to keep your wake up time the same and that auto regulation starts to happen, then there's a degree of consistency in your day. That's also part of structure too. But if it's one day on Monday it's 7 a.m. On Tuesday it's 6:30. On Wednesday it's 7:45. There's no consistency there. Our brain likes consistency. It likes expectation,
Mm-hmm.
what to anticipate. So if we get that consistent wake up time, it's a lot easier to then structure your day in a way that allows you to have a moment for yourself in the morning before you
Yeah.
do anything. So you don't feel like you're starting behind the eight ball. It
Yeah.
gives you an opportunity to have more space for yourself and be more intentional throughout your morning as well.
Totally, coach. Yeah.
Yes.
The other thing on the topic of sleep as well to think about is alcohol. And as we age, it just becomes more difficult to process alcohol, to break it down. We all know that a hangover at 40 is extremely different to a hangover at 20. It's just a night and day difference. And so if you're using alcohol to try to fall asleep or to de-stress, you're making everything more challenging for yourself. You're making sleep quality worse. Because that's what, yeah, sure, you can maybe fall asleep easier, but you're not going to stay asleep. And even if you can stay asleep, it's not going to be a good quality of sleep. So alcohol just needs to be cut down as much as you possibly can. I'm not going to say stop drinking. I will say that for every drink you have, it's going to be more difficult. And I do drink. Okay, I don't consider myself a non-drinker, but I am like it's hard to say, but like I'm a 0 to 4 drinks per month kind of person. Per month, not per week, per month.
Nice.
0 to 4 per month, and I don't drink every week. Yeah, I mean, it's the day after St. Paddy's Day, by the way, and I had 2 drinks last night.
Things got wild at the Rosentrain's house.
Yeah, my sleep sucked last night. I'm so fucking tired today, man. Honestly, 2 drinks. That's what happens when you get older.
One thing that I remember that people found a lot of value in when I ran a sleep master class was the idea of sleep doesn't happen in hours, it happens in cycles.
Yeah.
Right. You go through your light sleep, your REM sleep, your deep sleep over a 90-minute period. And the number of cycles that you get of that is going to determine whether or not only you feel more well rested, but our body's got this really cool mechanism where in the initial part of the night, the earlier parts of when you go to bed, you're going to have more of that deep restorative sleep that's going to restore your physical fatigue. And that's because the physical fatigue is going to be most important to help you run away if you encounter a bear. Let's just use this as an example. The more emotional restoration and the more anti-inflammatory component of sleep in terms of rest happens later in night in later cycles. So if you're not getting adequate volume, this is why you'll wake up feeling very puffy faced. You'll feel maybe a little bit more emotionally short, having a short fuse for that day. It's because you haven't had the adequate volume in order to be able to have the rest that's adequate to restore those parts of your physiology as well.
Exactly, coach. Exactly. Okay, part 2. We haven't just done a magic trick where we've changed clothes instantly. It is a few days later. We're picking this back up. It's 7:15 a.m. Eastern time.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's why I see it's dark behind you outside still. Toronto's still asleep. Yeah, on a Saturday. It's Saturday morning as well. That's dedication for you. How waking up early on a Saturday morning. Now, I didn't wake up so early because I'm an hour ahead of you, coach. But you woke up nice and early to keep talking. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, man.
What I see a lot with our clients who are going through perimenopause, and not even our clients, but maybe their behaviors before they started to work with us. The weekends are one of the things that we often have to address because of that stress that we've already touched on, all the responsibilities that you have. It can feel like, oh, okay, Friday night, no work this weekend. Let's crack open a bottle of wine. Let's order some pizza. And that's okay. It's completely fine to do that. But do you need that 3rd glass of wine? Do you need that 4th or 5th slice of pizza? Because if that happens every weekend, maybe Friday and Saturday, or maybe even just one, because it is annoyingly easy to undo several days of work, several days of a calorie deficit in one evening, especially with that kind of very calorie dense food. I often talk about going to like a Mexican restaurant and getting the guac and chips and having a margarita. Honestly, like getting the guac and chips as your appetizer with a margarita, you could easily crush like 1,200 calories with those 2 things alone and barely even feel it. You would swear if you had to guess, I probably had like 300 or 400 calories with the guac and chips that I had. No. It's just so calorie dense that you don't feel it.
Yeah.
And this happens a lot, right, coach?
Yeah. it happens a lot. Like, well, it happened to me last night. I went out to dinner with a friend of mine. We've gone to the Keg,
Yeah.
which is a
Yep.
steakhouse here in Toronto. Well, I think they're everywhere. But anyway,
We
it was
have
at the
one here
Keg.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So we get there and we figure, okay, we're gonna order this plate of different types of steak because it makes sense from an economic perspective. It's better value for your dollar, whatever. What do we get for an
Yeah.
appetizer? We had said initially, okay, we had said let's get shrimp cocktails, and it was like
Mm.
$20 each, and you got to get one each, so it's like $40 on that. And we're like, no, man, let's just get the spinach dip and chips because it's $20
Mm.
for one. You can share that with two people. Awesome. I mean, we weren't really calorie counting, obviously, at the time,
Yep.
and yeah, like you can crush that in no time. And
Yeah.
I think it's that circumstance of what are the like what how calorically dense is that relative to volume, right? And if you think of
Mm.
it, okay,
Yep.
it was a spinach cheese dip with chips. Cool. So the chips are fried. The
Mm-hmm.
spinach dip has a ton of calories in it because of all the cheese, etc. And obviously, it's the first thing you eat. So it takes that 20-minute time frame for your stomach to tell your brain that you're full, and there's no fiber in it. Well, minimal fiber when you think of like the amount
Yeah.
of spinach that's actually in there. So it's not really gonna satiate you to the point where you feel like, okay, I'm gonna eat less by the time the actual meal comes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Is this a thing that you do every week, or is this like an occasional special occasion?
This was a special occasion last night. A friend of mine and I, we
There we
haven't
go.
seen each other in quite a while, and he's
Yeah.
going to be moving to another country. So we wanted to get together and just
Yep.
enjoy each other's company and have some food.
So this, I'm glad you brought that up, Coach, because I often talk with our clients, and I think I've probably done it on the podcast before, about differentiating between social occasions and special occasions.
Hmm.
Right. So if you were meeting up with your friend every single week and doing this, I'm sure, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Coach, there will be slow but actual weight gain over the next few months if you do this on
Of
a
course.
weekly basis. Okay. Because social things can easily happen once or twice per week, basically 50 to 100 times per year. So almost a third of the year potentially. But if this happens, let's say even once a month, and I'm sure it doesn't even happen that frequently for you, Coach, right? Where you go out and you would eat and drink like this.
Mm,
Well, once a month is 12 times a year versus 100 times a year.
mm. Very
So
different.
now we see where if we treat social occasions the exact same way as we treat special occasions, you are not going to get any results. In fact, things are going to go in the opposite direction. You're probably not even going to maintain if this happens every single week. I'm guessing that anybody listening who is currently treating weekly or bi-weekly social events as if they were special events, I'm sure that they have been gaining weight slowly over time. And it can be slow, right? It can be so. It can be like a tenth to a quarter of a pound of body fat per week,
Mm,
which you don't notice until a few years have gone by and suddenly you're 50 pounds heavier.
yeah,
It can happen like that, right?
absolutely. And so I'm also going out again this evening with one of my neighbors because him and I had done some work together. He wants to celebrate. Cool. However, because I had gone out yesterday, I know that wherever he picks for dinner, that's fine. I know that I'm going to go into it with a bit more of a headspace of, okay, we had a special event yesterday. We're not going to have a special event today. It's going to be more social. Stick to
Yep,
something that's a little bit more on the side of, in line with nutritious food. That's going to be, yeah, aligned with my caloric intake for the day rather than just like I did yesterday where I didn't really consider that at all.
absolutely. Yeah. So on the weekend, we can't just treat it like a free for all.
Mm,
We really can't. Going to maintenance once or twice over the weekend, that's fine. Increase calories by 500. You could even save them for a particular event if you want to, like going out for dinner or going out for brunch. You can save those extra calories for that and expect, yeah, I'm going to maintain. So my net progress for those 2 days from a weight loss perspective is going to be zero. But from like a long-term success perspective, the progress is going to be basically still moving forwards because you're going to
mm,
maintain some degree of momentum over the weekend. You're not going to undo, the last 3 or 4 or 5 days worth of a calorie deficit in 1 or 2 evenings from not paying any kind of attention. So we
yeah.
still do need to be consistent with meals most of the time on the weekend. I know for me, my breakfast and my lunch is basically the same on a weekend as it is during the week. I might change the ingredients or the flavors a little bit, but in terms of protein and calories, it's basically the same.
Yeah.
And then the variety comes at dinner time.
Yeah, I think having one meal like that where it's more variety, that's what also keeps things interesting and making it feel like, okay, you know, if every like okay, if every day everything you do is like spreadsheet style where everything's accounted for and like yeah, we talk a lot about how planning is stress management. Absolutely.
Yeah.
At the same time, at what point are you going to live? So you have to have that integration where you're able to say, okay, because I've planned all of this, that means it gives me more margin on the other side of it to make choices that are also different and novel versus everything's always different and novel and that's
Yeah.
what's causing me stress. So it's about finding that place on the spectrum. I think there's a bigger issue as well with if the weekends are always getting blown out where you're not conscientious around your choices,
Mm.
you start to lose this confidence in yourself. You start to lose your ability. Like it's almost like a self-deprecating thing because okay, you go out on Friday, awesome. You
Mm.
figure, well, it's Friday. I've already gone out. Maybe I'll just do the same thing on Saturday. And Sunday is the day before Monday. So what are you gonna do? You're gonna just
Yeah.
roll right into Monday. Monday, you get back to the scale. You weigh yourself. You put on your work clothes, and maybe they feel a bit tighter. Not because you put on fat, more so because maybe you have extra hydration. You're holding on to more water. You're feeling a bit
Mm.
more inflamed because you got poor sleep over the weekend because you were out late. All these things. So then you get into this place where now you're regretting the choices you've made over the weekend, and it becomes this self-deprecating thing of okay, now I don't feel good about my choices, and you roll that into the week, and it's this constant loop and cycle where you start
Yeah.
to lose trust in yourself and your ability to actually enjoy life as well.
Totally. Let's also bring perimenopause into this too.
Mm,
So perimenopause, let's say you've got like a couple of kids maybe, right? Maybe they're anywhere from like age 3 or 4 up to like teenagers. But either way, you've got a couple of kids. And there is inherent stress involved in having kids while working full time. Then we add perimenopause.
mm,
So you're going through the week not planning. You're winging it. You're getting more and more mentally drained as the week goes on, which makes you feel even more stressed. You get to Friday night. Yeah, of course you're going to crush a bottle of wine. Of course you are. So go back and listen to what Coach Santa was just saying about planning each day, not winging it. I guarantee you that you will no longer feel like by the end of the day you're only at 1 or 2% battery. You feel like at 5 p.m., okay, I'm at like 20, 25%.
mm.
Just from having a vague plan for breakfast, lunch, and when you're going to get your movement in that day without having to figure it out at the time. If you can also have a plan for dinner, yeah, you're going to feel even less mentally drained. So just block off some time on the weekend, on a Sunday night maybe, or maybe just like first thing in the morning, Monday night even, whenever you need to do it, to have some kind of plan. Okay, and then we mentioned like perimenopause, we've mentioned wine, and as we get older, and especially as you go through perimenopause and then full-blown menopause, it just becomes harder and harder for your body to process alcohol. You're going to feel shittier and shittier the day after. It's going to be so much easier for you to get hungover. Your sleep is going to be worse and worse if you keep doing this. And this is all to do with perimenopause. It's all to do with getting older. It's again like your metabolism has not slowed down. It's just the body has a harder time processing things as it ages and as we get through perimenopause as well.
Mm.
So you're making it more and more difficult for yourself to, on let's say a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, to be able to get back on track with your regular habits because you're going to feel too shitty to be able to do it. So instead of having 3, 4 glasses of wine, maybe 1 or 2, right? That will be an improvement over 3 or 4. Instead of just completely blowing off nutrition for the entire weekend, you could even go to maintenance for the entire weekend if that's what you need to do first. You'll still drop like a couple of pounds of body fat per month, which might not
Mm.
sound like a lot, but do that for a year and you're 25 pounds down.
Mm.
And Still get in some degree of movement on the weekend as well. Yes, I know it's challenging. We've just mentioned kids. I know that you often have to drive kids. Like right now, hockey season has been like happening recently. So I know you're probably going to be taking kids to various venues over the weekend, spending a lot of time sitting. But that's not an excuse. It's just an obstacle that you can overcome.
Mm.
Like you can wake up at a better time because you haven't had as much wine the night before. Get some steps in before you leave. When you get to the venue, when you know that your kid isn't playing, get up, move around. When you get back in the evening, you're probably not going to want to, but it doesn't matter whether you want to do this or not. If you want to maintain momentum and get results, you're going to have to push through that slight discomfort and just get on the walking pad or go for a walk in the evening when you get back.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know that you're tired from a long day of driving, but it's kind of what you need to do. There needs to be some work and doing things that you don't want to do involved in this. Like half the time, I don't want to work out, but I do it anyway. Like
Hmm.
honestly, like 50% of the time, I'm like, you know what? I'd rather not do this. I would rather be doing something else right now. But it's important. The results are important, and you got to just do that work.
Mm.
It's gonna suck,
Yeah.
but do it anyway. And if you do that, it will suck less long term because it just becomes a habit.
Yeah, I think there's a. I think one of the biggest challenges is that, and I've mentioned this in on my page as well before. You've gone into work where you weren't feeling 100%. You were slightly
Yeah,
sick, not enough to take a sick day, or maybe you went out drinking the night before and you came in hungover. You still went to work because you have responsibilities and duties, so this way you can be employed to be able to do the things that you do and live your life, etc.
yeah,
However, when it comes to our health, we seem to keep things at this standard that's unrealistic to keep, where I'm only going to do
mm,
X if I'm 100%. Well, you don't
yeah,
need to do that. So, coach, there have been days like my same like yourself where I've gone to the gym and I've thought to myself, I'm supposed to do 225 on a back. I don't want to do that today. I'm not doing squats with
yeah,
225, but I could totally do it with 195, 205, reduce the amount of intensity and make it a bit easier for myself. So it's like, okay, I'm still ticking the box on this. Yeah, it's not where I was or where I want to be. However, where I actually want to be is in here doing this right now, just at the
mm,
level in which I can operate and complete it as well. So we're holding ourselves to a higher standard when it comes to our employment than it is our health, and that's the inverse. We should hold ourselves
yeah,
to a standard that allows us to complete the things that we want to complete so that we can have better long-term health and better health outcomes as well.
yeah. Absolutely. You mentioned work, and I think
Mm,
it's important to show up and do a good job at work. It's also important to do a good job and show up for yourself, for your
of course.
health. And let's be honest, your job, your company is not really going to give a fuck if your health gets to the point where you have to stop working. It will hire somebody else.
Yeah.
It's just yeah, it's part of living in a capitalist society.
Mm,
That's what happens.
yeah. In those circumstances, like, you can be replaced, but for your
Absolutely.
kids, for your partner, your spouse, there's no other employee that they can slide in there. Right? Like, you have
Yeah.
to do what
There's
you can
no
to
new body you
establish.
can find, right?
Exactly. And like what we're mentioning
Yeah.
here about, sleep disruption, that kind of stuff as well. Like, keeping in mind what the following day is going to feel like when you're making these plans associated with your weekend too is super helpful. Like,
Yeah.
okay, what do I have coming up on Sunday? Do I want to feel like the way I know what I'm about to do is going to make me feel? So, coach, I do a lot of like cold plunging and
Mm.
sauna work. So I believe it's during the luteal phase when women shouldn't necessarily cold plunge because it's a lot of stress on the body. Okay. Like during their menstrual cycle. So, I was talking to someone last night while I was there, and this woman had said the same thing. Like, yeah, I'm not the cold plunging type because of A, B, and C. I don't like the way it makes me feel, etc. Okay, so this person is considering how that action would have certain implications that they don't want to experience later that night or into the next day.
Mm.
So they change their behavior predicated on how they're feeling in that moment relative to their own body. It's these small signals that you get from your body that, from experiences you've had in the past, where you collect that data, say, I didn't feel great after I did that thing. I've
Yeah.
always said, having workouts that make you feel like shit aren't aren't the greatest workouts. Like, I don't remember the last time I felt like shit and thought to myself, like, that was really enjoyable. I'm gonna do that again. Like, chances are
Mm.
negative, right? But if you
Yeah.
can make decisions and choices that are associated with, okay, I don't feel terrible. Yeah, sure, maybe a bit off. That's fine. Then
Mm.
you know the cost of those decisions as well. And longer term, it's going to
Yeah.
set you up for more success because you'll feel better in the following days to come after that as well.
Absolutely, coach. Yeah. And the thing about perimenopause and how difficult it can make all of this feel, which is valid, is that I get the messaging, right, to be kind to yourself, to give yourself grace. And
Mm,
I agree with that. Sometimes the kind decision, let's not forget, is to do the hard work. Like
yeah.
that can be, and it often is the kindest decision to yourself. Let's be even more specific. It's the kindest approach to the future version of you, to tomorrow's
Hmm.
version of you, to next week, next month, next year's, next decades, to you in your 80s. The kind decision is to do the work, to
Mm,
make the harder choice. And I know that a lot of people listen to this are probably going to be thinking, oh, what do you two men understand about how it feels when you're going through perimenopause? And you are absolutely correct in that. We are never ever going to be able to like appreciate even like a small percentage of how it feels. And that doesn't make anything that we're saying today wrong, just because we don't know what it's going to feel like. In the same way that an oncologist doesn't need to have cancer to treat a cancer patient. A heart
yeah.
specialist doesn't need to have had a heart attack to be able to treat a heart attack patient.
Mm.
No, not that we are anywhere close to being doctors, let's be honest, right? This is just like an analogy that we're using, obviously.
Yeah, of course. I think also, though, like we've been doing this with a certain archetype of individual, working with them and navigate. Like we, as much as our clients learn
Yeah.
from us, we learn from them too. Like we speak
A
about this all the
hundred
time.
percent. A hundred
We
percent.
don't
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we don't make plans. Hey, let's try this. Run this experiment. Awesome. Cool. Hey,
Yes.
that didn't work. Cool. My bad. Let's try something different. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's try this instead. Like the same way that we, yeah, may never experience that menopause. I also recognize that or perimenopause, any of the things that are relative to women that don't necessarily apply to men,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that you can't help. Sometimes you just need someone to help you see the label on the jar that you're in to be like, hey, listen, I know you're experiencing these symptoms, but we also recognize A, B, and C about your lifestyle. Have you considered trying this intervention or
Yeah.
trying this lifestyle change? And it's at the same in the same at the same token, we are still humans. So there are things that
Mm.
we understand from a behavioral perspective, from a
Yeah.
muscle physiology perspective, recovery perspective, that still applies.
Yeah. And let's be honest, we as as human beings, like living in North America as we do and as do most of our clients. And not even North America, we have way more similarities than we do differences. Like way more.
One coach I know said the one similarity we all have is that we're all different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, so like perimenopause is going to make it more difficult because hunger can be more easily triggered due to the symptoms and the poor sleep that can happen, right?
Hmm.
Recovery is going to be slower. But none of these changes in perimenopause are going to impact that basic energy balance of calories in versus calories out. Of course, it is not only about calories in versus calories out, because I see that as a common objection to when I talk about a calorie deficit on Instagram. Like, oh, are you saying that calories in, calories out is the only thing that matters? I'm like, no, are you stupid? Like, look at my other posts. Look how often I talk about eating protein and vegetables and following the 80-20 guideline and getting enough sleep and managing stress. Of course, it's not the only thing that matters, but it is the most important thing for weight loss to actually happen. All of those other things that I just mentioned, though, think of them as the support systems for staying consistent with that energy balance of calories in versus calories out.
Mm.
And it is just going to be harder to find that balance and to find the right support systems during perimenopause that actually work for you. Because maybe you didn't really need many support systems in your 20s. Maybe you could, sleep less and experience more stress day to day at work and still be consistent,
Yeah.
mostly because you didn't have the perimenopause symptoms happening. Also, you probably didn't have kids at that time as well. So life was just easier. And when life is easier, we don't need as many of these support systems in place to make the calorie balance work. But now you are where you are. The focus has to be a lot more on having the right support systems in place for you.
Hmm. I think a big component of aging is, I think a large part of life when it comes to just aging, um, just going through it in general, is finding efficiencies and becoming more effective at doing things. And as we get older, we find these efficiencies, we become more effective, and our margins for managing stress can start to get smaller because we experience less of it as time goes on, hopefully, right? And as you get older, your capacity for managing that, because it's an aging process, starts to decrease if you're not doing something like strength training where you're voluntarily evoking a stress response. So if you're always reducing the amount of stress that you have, like, I don't think that stress is this thing that you need to avoid. It's something that you're going to inherently encounter as time goes on. Cool. How do we implement stress management tools that allow us to navigate it in a way that's going to be constructive for us? Okay, I'm
Yeah.
stressed. Is it positive stress? Is it negative stress? Pick one. And from there,
Yep.
you find a way to
Yeah.
navigate it. Right. And I think
Totally.
with that as well, if you're in that, for example, like sleep disruption, you can't get a good quality sleep, recovery is tough. Cool. How do you navigate that? Well, eating and drinking like shit isn't going to help the cause. So
Yeah.
actually expressing a and choosing a behavior that's associated with giving yourself some self-compassion, self-love, feeding
Yeah.
yourself properly, making sure that you're not trying to burn the candle at both ends in the middle on the day where you're not well rested. That's going to help contribute to the overall improvement of getting back that capacity too and recovering properly.
100% coach. Yeah. We hear it all too often, right? That a calorie deficit just doesn't work for me anymore now that I'm in perimenopause. And if you are more honest about what you have been doing, as you just described, coach, sleep is poor, so I'm not even going to bother trying. Like, how many days has something like that happened? That is why the calorie deficit isn't working for you, because you're not actually in a calorie deficit. That's why. And it can feel like perimenopause is almost working against you. And in a way, you're right, because it is going to make everything more difficult. And I want to keep acknowledging that, because I'm not saying that, oh, it's easy, all you have to do is X, Y, or Z. No, we have to accept that at this time during perimenopause, it is going to be more difficult to lose weight. But only more difficult in the sense that there has to be more of these supporting systems in place. And there has to be more focus on them. And you just have to adjust your approach. It's not that perimenopause has made weight loss impossible. It's that your environment is now difficult. Things are more challenging. It's kind of like running on the sidewalk versus running in sand.
Mm,
You could still run a mile on the sand. It's just going to be more difficult than running on the sidewalk.
right. Yeah. You know, difficulty is going to be a relative term in this circumstance, I think, as well,
Mm.
because it's also going to be difficult relative to what tools you are using to elicit a particular response. So again, I think we mentioned this earlier in the episode where, you're trying the things that you've done prior, but that's
Yes.
not your current physiological state. So how are you going to
Yeah.
try to apply similar rules and approaches, like from a business perspective, if you're still handing out flyers? Maybe like that might still be a good idea. I'm not sure. I'm not a marketing expert, but you'd probably be better off marketing on social media and using that instead, because that's the more relevant tool for the time being, right? So how do
Mm.
you figure out what is most important and relevant right now? So in a circumstance in which, so like, great example I would think is if you feel like, okay, because I was working out 4 days a week, 5 days a week when I was younger. That's where I got my best results. Cool. We mentioned earlier, your recovery is low, your sleep is disrupted. It's not as easy to have a
Mm.
quicker turnaround. Cool.
Yeah.
So to do that now in a circumstance in which you're actually sleep deprived and not by choice, but by physiological circumstance with perimenopause or menopause, that's not going to work. So you can't apply the same rules to a more aging body or someone who
Mm.
is in a circumstance in which that kind of physiological response isn't met with any sort of result or any sort of benefit that it would if you were in your 20s or your 30s.
Yeah.
So this is also my favorite part of coaching because it starts to lean to the side of self-discovery. Okay, cool.
Mm.
I'm different now. Great. Let me unfold that a little bit more. Let me pull out that thread and figure out, okay, I can't do 5 HIIT workouts a week like I used to with my friends. But what I can do is 2 strength workouts and 1 HIIT workout, and I still get the social time. And we compare our strength workouts together. Oh, I'm doing this now. What are you doing? So there's different ways that this starts to evolve into a different identity. And that's the beautiful part of it. Imagine you were doing the same shit for 20 years. I'd go fucking crazy if I had to do that.
Exactly,
Like, I
coach.
want to
Yeah.
try and do different things, learn different skills, right? Be parts
Yeah.
of different communities.
Yeah. And to touch on the physiological changes that can potentially happen during perimenopause, if you feel that things have gone like so differently, maybe you feel that, you know what, there's got to be some kind of hormonal thing happening. I and Coach Santo, we strongly encourage you to go and talk to your doctor. Get tested. Okay. And then when you get the results back, if everything is normal, the response should probably be, okay, awesome, I'm in control. Because if hormones are off and you have to go on to some kind of medication, well, even that you still have control. You can think, okay, cool, now I can get medicated and now I can crush this. So either
Either
way,
way,
you're
it's
winning.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have any kind of suspicion, talk to your doctor, get some tests done, and whatever the outcome is, you're going to be able to crush it. Because it's either, oh, everything's fine, fully in my control, or okay, I can get medicated and then get back to crushing it. And you're right, coach, that even in that situation where maybe you are being medicated, it doesn't mean that you can now go and try and do the thing that used to work for you 20 years ago, because the things have changed. Things
Mm-hmm.
are different. And it doesn't work like it used to because you are not the same person as you were. Things have changed, as we've already described in this episode, and more support systems need to be in place. And by support systems, we're specifically talking about habits and focusing on sleep and focusing on stress management and planning ahead and doing all of these other supporting habits that will make those primary drivers of weight loss, like the calorie deficit, the steps, the strength training. And when I say weight loss, I mean more fat loss than weight loss. The
Mm.
supporting habits make those big things actually work. So they all need to be in place. And if you need any help with this, I mean, we're releasing this episode on Monday, March 23rd. So there's basically around 14 weeks left until July 1st.
Mm.
And in that time, even if you are in perimenopause and you are struggling with weight loss, most people can still lose 10 to 15 pounds in that period of 14 weeks with the right structure and set of habits in place. And if you need some help or you want some help coming up with that set of systems and structure that works for you, just tap the link in the description. It's rosentrain.com/call, CALL. rosentrain.com/CALL. That will take you to a page where you can book a 10-minute call with me. The goal of that call is really simple. It's essentially to see whether I think we can help you or not. Okay. If we don't think that I can help you, not a problem. I can always give you some resources or refer you to somebody else. But if we do think that this will be a good match and that I can help, we'll book another call. We'll do a deep dive, and on that deep dive call, we'll come up with the foundations of a set of structures that would work for you. Coach Sando, thank you so much for today. Thanks everybody for listening. I appreciate you, Coach Santo, getting up early on a Saturday morning. I'm sure you're probably up anyway around this kind of time because I know like how hard you work and like you're like a day a week, maybe like a 7 days a week kind of person. But still, I appreciate you spending some of your time today on this. And yeah, we hope everybody has a wonderful week.
Thanks, Coach. Thanks for listening, everybody.